This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. A great story last week with the IPOing of Uber, recounting the background of Uber CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi. He's an Iranian immigrant, asylum seeker. His family fled Iran when the revolution came in the late 70s and the Shah was deposed. As a New Yorker piece about Khosrowshahi recounts, the family watched from across an ocean as their manufacturing business, which produced consumer and pharmaceutical goods under brands licensed from Western countries, was nationalized by the new Islamic government in Iran. And Khosrowshahi tells the New Yorker, talking about what his family experienced, including, oh, by the way, his father being arrested by the government and imprisoned for 6 years when he went back to take care of his own father, who was ill. His mother being left to care for 3 teenage boys, taking a job as a salesperson at a high-end women's clothing boutique in Manhattan, the sort of store she previously would have frequented as a client. Khosrowshahi says, I think there was this undercurrent within my family, which was that we had lost everything. And he, in his first address to Uber employees, he put it more bluntly, there's this chip you have on your shoulder as an immigrant that drives you. Well, pun intended, I guess, drives you, Uber. But there's no question it's driven Khosrowshahi to be a successful entrepreneur in this country, the CEO of the celebrated Uber, despite its stock performance thus far. And so thinking about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in Chicago, all the success stories, and then reading this piece by Howard Tullman at Inc., which I mentioned yesterday when we were talking to the Technology and Manufacturing Association guys. Howard Tullman was the former CEO of 1871, which is the tech incubator downtown. Successful entrepreneur himself, has done a dozen successful startups. Yeah. He talks, though, in his piece about the essentially millennial generation, I guess, and perhaps younger, of entrepreneurs. Well, let me put it this way. The headline in his piece is Young, Stupid, and Overconfident.
Yeah, he said they lack expertise, experience, and most of all, the slightest bit of empathy.
So, yeah.
So very true.
We talk about entrepreneurship as a good, and it is. You need creative people. You need innovators. You need disruptors. But how does that happen, as Howard Tullman writes, in the world of whatever? Well, why don't we ask him? We're pleased to be joined by Howard Tullman, General Managing Partner of G2T3V.
I'm glad you said it, so I didn't have to.
Ring to it. Executive Director of the Kaplan Institute. He's got a new book, You Can't Win a Race with Your Mouth, and 299 other expert tips from a lifelong entrepreneur. Howard, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
So, sort of teed it up, but give us your thumbnail riff on these entrepreneurs of whom you write, because it seemed like you were a bit exasperated and had to wrote this column as sort of a cathartic experience dealing with these kids.
Well, for sure, all my columns are cathartic. But the truth is that I don't control the headlines on my articles. So there's some person at Inc. whose job is to make these things clickable. So my original title for the piece was They Have to Pay You, but They Don't Have to Thank You, okay? And it was all about the fact that you got to earn your way, and you can't take it for granted, and you can't expect that everybody is going to go out of their way to, deal with you as a snowflake or whatever. They made it a little stronger. But listen, it's the case today that people think that there's tricks of the trade or there's some shortcut. And, you could talk about Dara, or you could talk about anybody who's lived through this stuff, and you discover that what it really takes is hard work. And you're not going to figure out some shortcut to any of this stuff. And this was, sort of the lesson. And by the way, I don't think that it was even pointed just to the kids. because I think that, mentors and professors and parents and everybody else has contributed to this everybody wins, economy where everybody gets a trophy and everybody, is successful. And that's not how the real world works. And so the moral of this, especially around graduation time, was just to try and summarize a couple of messages that I think it would be useful to share with these folks who are about to enter the real world and the working world. And that was the point of the article, really, which is to tell them what is expected of them and sort of tell them the truth about their skills. They all think that they're, rocket scientists and geniuses.
Right.
And I'm sorry, go ahead, Amy.
No, I was going to tell you two stories. One, I have a family member he had to go to a conference on how to deal with millennials in the workforce. So that makes me feel like we're catering to them. And also, I have another friend who she works for a Fortune 500 company. She was had to release a millennial. They were doing a job review, and the millennial brought her mom in with her, and her mom said, "Not only should you keep her, but she should be making X amount of money."
Yeah, I know.
I mean, is this our new reality?
Well, the helicopter, parents are insane. I mean, they're driving not just all of the higher ed people crazy, but it's now leaking into the business world, just as you say, where the parents have expectations for their kids. And by the way, this is, it'll be interesting because a lot of people believe that this is the last generation that's going to be upwardly socially mobile and economically mobile, in the sense that maybe this next group is not going to be able to afford a house and not going to be able to make more than their parents made. And I think that freaks everybody out. But, the truth is that it's going to be very challenging right now for these big companies where they tell, everybody that they should cater to this new generation, in part because, look, you've got unemployment at ridiculously low rates. So it's not easy to come by talent. But the truth is that talent doesn't do it alone. I mean, you can be the most creative, talented person in the world, but if you're not willing to put in the work, and if you're basically also not willing to work with other people, you're just not going to be successful. It's not sort of the Lone Ranger these days. It takes a team to accomplish just about anything important.
Well, right, and I suppose you also marginalize yourself at some point. Perhaps the job market won't always be as tight as it is today. And I mean that they what you recount, or the way you describe, I should say, the interview process these days, it's more, I mean, it's like you go in for an interview and you say, enough about me, let's talk about you and what you can do for me and how about this culture. And, you describe these interviews with, this is mostly young people that are entering the workforce or attempting to.
Well, it's important to understand what the perks and the benefits are that come with the job. But the most important thing is to understand and be excited about the job opportunity and what you're going to accomplish. Today, the best employees, the best of these kids, want to work with other talented people. They want to do something that's important. And most important, they want to feel pride about what they do. They want to have the right resources and do something that's significant. We talk to entrepreneurs all the time about fear and about, being not afraid of failing. It's going to happen in anything you try to do. And we always say, look, it's not failure that's something to be afraid of. It's that you could wake up one day after 10 or 20 years and discover that you spent your whole career doing something that nobody gave a shit about. So, you'll pardon my French.
Okay.
But in this everybody wins and everybody gets a participation trophy society that we live in, they're going to have to fail at some time to realize that this is the real world. This is how things work. Don't you think?
Yeah, and I think the funny thing is that what we focus on is, when you go to a school these days, even a high school or a junior high school, the kids who have the lights turned on in their heads are the kids who are doing everything but the core curriculum. They're the jocks, they're the music kids, they're the chess kids, the robotics kids, and what's happened is they found something that they could take responsibility for and some ownership about, and then they got excited. And those are the kids we look for, because the kids who excelled in, extracurricular activities are, they're tuned in, they're self-directed, they understand that you have to work really hard to master these things because, there isn't a sort of a subjective measurement here. It's a very clear thing. You're either going to win the chess match or you're not, and your robot's either going to work or not. So those are the kids we look for. It's, it's not just that you sort of burnish your resume by extracurricular activities. It's that those are the kids who learn the life lessons. One of the most astonishing things now is we're automating a lot of sort of the redundant and the basic functions that used to be the way we entered the work world. And, now the kids come in and say, I want to jump right to, the head of marketing. I don't want to hand out flyers, or I don't want to, stuff envelopes or do any of these kinds of things. And the interesting thing is, it's great that the automation is going to get rid of those crummy jobs and let us do more creative things. But those crummy jobs were like where we learned a lot of the rules of the road about paying attention to the details, about doing the work that was foundational, before you went on to, being your own boss and things like that. And I don't know how we're going to train these kids from a culture standpoint, as to what's important when, you're saying to them a reasonable expectation is you'll be meeting with clients right away. You'll be making sales calls right away. And that never used to happen. People did a year of cold calls before they were, ever got face to face with a client, and they learned how hard that is. And today, that's all going to disappear.
Well, one of the things that you suggest too is that these workers should be thanked for their actual contributions to the core mission of the organization, rather than simply being thanked for sharing their feelings or
thanked
these other
every
things.
Friday.
Yeah, right.
Thanked every Friday. And by the way, I think that's I think the other thing you have to be careful of when you're trying to build a business, and especially with a bunch of these kids, is if you let the sort of the people who aren't performing be treated in the same way as the people who are performing, what happens is the slugs stick around. Okay, the good people leave because the good people are interested in a place where the talent and the hard work is actually recognized, not where everybody is treated equally. And so that's the scariest thing, is that you lose the good people when you're trying to accommodate everybody and saying that sort of mediocre is good across the board.
He is Howard Tullman, General Managing Partner, G2T3V LLC, Executive Director of Kaplan Institute. His book, You Can't Win a Race with Your Mouth, and 299 other expert tips from a lifelong entrepreneur. And you can check out his piece, which I tweeted out at Inc.com as well. Howard, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
If you're talking about it, Dan and Amy are talking about it. It's Chicago's Morning